Good morning. It is February 16th, 2024. I'm here with Peter Hyatt. My name is Paul Ortiz, and we're doing the oral history under the auspices of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. Peter, thank you so much for being with me this morning and agreeing to talk about your life history.
Okay.
All right. Well, I wonder if you wouldn't mind taking us back to, your early life. Kind of tell us a little bit, or tell me a little bit about kind of where you grew up, kind of what early life was like for you.
Well, just interrupt whenever you want to like this, because I can do. I started becoming aware of the world and so on somewhere along of the time of my fifth year, maybe a little bit in the fourth in 4 years old, but about 5 years old. I was born in Chicago. My father was going to the Chicago School of Osteopathy at the time. This was 1941. I remember the beginning of World War II as being when I was walking down the hallway in our little apartment, and my brother was walking the other way, and he told me that the war had started, and I didn't know what the word war meant. My father graduated in 1941, and we moved out to the Oregon coast. He took over a practice in Tillamook County in Oregon. Tillamook County is on the north coast of Oregon. That's where Tillamook cheese comes from. And I went to the first grade there. It was a one-room schoolhouse with 4 grades in one room, and my teacher was Mrs. Lewis. And what I learned is that she read stories. And I don't think I learned anything more than that. I really don't. I was not a good student. I was, just to explain a little bit about my family, I am the second child of 4. I am the runt of the family. My father and my older and younger brothers are both quite a bit bigger than I am, or were. And my sister was a younger sister, a year and a half younger than me, was quite a bit bigger than I was. I was definitely the runt. And I developed slowly. I tried to go to kindergarten once when we were in Waukegan, Illinois, and that didn't work. I wasn't ready for it at all. And anyway, I went the first part of the first grade in Pacific City, Oregon, which is a little town on the coast. None of anything that I remember there exists anymore. Then we moved to Nescoin, which is a little resort town on the coast of Oregon. And I have a lot of memories of Nescoin, and that we used to go down to the beach all the time because we were just a block from the beach. And this was during the war, of course, and the beach was patrolled by the Coast Guard. And these guys, Coast Guard soldiers with dogs, patrolled the beach looking for the invasion of Japan. Of course, the Japanese didn't invade, but anyway, that's what they did. So we could only go down to the beach in the daytime. Couldn't go down there at night. And basically, most of my childhood, especially my younger years, I was my older brother's protege. He was bigger and stronger and smarter and everything, than I was, and he was very patient with me, and I just totaled around with him. So my early part was really founded in following my older brother around. Let's see, I went to the first grade in Pacific City and Nescoin, went to the second grade in a little town called Hebo, Hebo, which is just off from the coast. That's where Dad had his office. We rented the what is still today called the Hebo Inn, and we lived in the downstairs. The inn was not active at that time, and he had his offices and some recovery offices and stuff like this for his medical practice in the second floor. anyway, you know, I have all kinds of memories of patrolling the beaches and you know, and playing war and all kinds of stuff like this when living in Igbo in my second grade. Between my second grade and third grade, I went to live with my grandparents for a while in Waukegan, Illinois. Then in the third grade, we moved to Albany, Oregon. And I lived for the rest of my grade school and high school years in Albany. One significant little incident that you know is it's weird some of the things you fall into when you're growing up. My best friend in Albany was Stevie Shelton. He was the victim of polio. He couldn't walk, so he walked with canes and you know and braces on his legs like this. And he and I used to run all over the place in Albany. He on his bicycle and me on my bicycle, and I had a rope between him and me, and I pulled him around town. Anyway, Stevie's father was the head of a government institution called the Bureau of Mines. The significant incident at the Bureau of Mines was that they had found that there was a deposit of rare earth elements called zirconium on the beaches in Oregon. And the Manhattan Project wanted to make the jacket for the atomic bomb out of zirconium because it would not absorb the radioactivity. So I knew all about this activity there. There were guards at the Bureau of Mines, and these soldiers were holding their guns like this at the entrance, like this. But Stevie and I were just cute little kids. And we could go in and do whatever we want to do, and so on. And we talked to the people there, and you could talk to the people, and they would tell you they were working on building the atomic bomb. You know, this was top secret stuff. Our adults didn't know what we were doing, but because we were cute little kids. And anyway, we found all about the you know how to build the casting for the atomic bomb. It was a big round thing with bobs and stuff sticking out of it like this, but it was big. It was, you know, round kind of thing, etc. And they had to figure out how to do the metallurgy on the atomic bomb. Of course, I had no idea what an atomic bomb was. It was just what they said. Anyway, you know, come the 1945, and they announced the day after they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima that this was an atomic bomb, you know, and I can remember very clearly saying, "Oh shit," you know, because I knew all about it, you know, but of course I knew nothing about it. So anyway, that was, you know, one of those little insignificant things that was a very special kind of memory. And anyway, the big thing that Stevie and I did was go over to the Bureau of Mines and steal mercury, because they were using mercury in the casting process for some reason or other, I don't know. And they would after they used it, mercury was dirty, and so they would just throw it away. And so Stevie and I would salvage this mercury and take it to school. You know, we put it in milk bottles. I mean, there was, you know, mercury is big stuff, you know. We had milk bottles of mercury, and we would take it to school and polish everybody's coins with it, having no idea what we were doing, you know, because it made the coins shiny. Anyway, significant things for me. I had, when I was a kid, had a very good singing voice. I used to sing in the Methodist church choir, even when I was a kid. I was the only kid in the choir, but I had a fairly adult type voice, even as a child. And one of the things that I didn't know was significant at the time, but I was not good at playing with other kids, not at all good at playing with other kids. But in the basement of the church building, there was a whole big bin of wooden blocks, blocks of, they would be this size or that this size and so on and so forth like this. And I made bridges with these blocks. And I figured out all the ways of how to weight them and wedge them and so on and so forth, so you can make longer and longer bridges, which I had no idea at the time like this. But eventually, I earned the major part of my life as being a civil engineer, using the same skills that I had learned with these blocks when I was in just grade school. So anyway, Stevie and I went on all kinds of adventures. We went on two big adventures going from Albany down to Eugene on our bicycles. We went out to the highway out on our bicycles, and then we would thumb a ride to Eugene, because there was a number of manufacturing people in Eugene, not connected with the University of Oregon at all, but manufacturing stuff like this. And we made off with mercury, and we made off with neon signs and all kinds of stuff, and took them back to Albany, where we would make them into, especially making neon signs. You can make all kinds of neat gadgets by heating the glass and so on, put them in there, and then put the generator onto the neon signs like this, and they would glow, and you could do all kinds of stuff. So we did lots of absolutely crazy things with all the stuff that we stole from retiring people in Eugene. This had nothing to do with U of O at that time. But anyway, well, let's talk about some other thing. My mother returned to college at the same time that my older brother did, and she graduated with her PhD in special education at the same time that my older brother graduated from college in psychology. And then she became the head of special education for all of Eastern Oregon. So when I was just after I was a senior in high school, my parents moved to Redmond, Oregon, and then to Bend, Oregon, where she took over leadership of special education facilities in all of Eastern Oregon. The most significant part about that is there's a big Indian reservation at Warm Springs, Oregon, just north of Redmond, where there's, I think, 3 different tribes of Indians there. And so I got to know quite a few of the Indians that were in Eastern Oregon. And that's when I first began to figure out like this, that the Indians didn't just talk one language. They had hundreds of them. And I have long since lost all of the words that I learned, but it was the first place I'd run into the fact that there were several of the Indian languages where the women had a different language than the men did. And so the women knew how to speak the men's language, and the men knew how to speak the women's language, but they didn't. The men and the women, though, had their separate languages. And so that was the first time I began to be introduced into the fact that cultures can have all this variation, so on. The other probably most significant event or culture thing like this when I lived in Oregon was right at the end of the war. There were all these British subjects, British colonies and so on and so forth that were breaking loose. They were sending their elite men to colleges in the United States because they couldn't send their men to colleges in Europe because, of course, they were just recovering from the war. So there was a whole host of college students, foreign college students, taking mostly food technology subjects in Corvallis. My parents had a special class in their church called the Builders class, and they would go Dad would go over to the campus at Oregon State, befriend one of these foreign students, um, and have them come over to the builders class in the Methodist Church and talk about their native country. And afterwards, my parents took them home, and we would have dinner with them and so on and so forth. And then we never lost them. Once a foreign student was in our home, well, he was welcome from then on. So I grew up with foreign students in the house all the time. And that became really sort of a central thing. It's hard to describe because of the experiences that I had, with my growing up, my family like this. I have a much, much, much broader view of foreigners than I see anywhere. And here at the village, a lot of people like to talk about all these things that they know all about these foreign countries, and 90% of what they know about all these foreign countries is false. Just plain untrue. And I try to be diplomatic and say, hey, what you're trying to tell me isn't so, but it just does not take at all.
Peter, you now when you were meeting people from different countries in and around Corvallis and during this kind of post World War II era, when you mentioned there's a lot of independence movements, young students, international students are coming into your kind of orbit. What were some of you mentioned earlier being surprised or learning about Native American cultures. What were some of the first things you remember learning about these other cultures of people who were coming to Oregon to go to school? Maybe things that surprised you or made an impact on you?
I don't remember that being surprised. There was the student there, and most of the highest number of students were from India. And of course, then I could learn a lot about Hinduism, quite a bit about Islam, quite a bit, some about Jains, but not much. There was only 2 Jains, I think, if I remember right, of the whole bunch. But no, it was just we would talk about these things, and of course the Hindus would have to talk about the things that they couldn't eat. So mom would have to adjust what we were cooking, and of course most of the foreign students would come in and help mom cook, actually. So we always had a very busy kitchen with foreign students and my sister and my mom and everybody but me. I stood at the outside and watched all this going on. I did not participate. But anyway, I wouldn't say I was surprised at anything because I was just a kid, What I'm doing is absorbing material, not relearning material or anything.
Right.
You become much more cognizant of different cultures simply doing things differently. They wore different clothes because their culture, said something about the clothes they were wearing. The particular way a woman would wrap a sari, for example. There was the the 5-yard sari and the 7-yard sari, and you learn these different things that people do and why they do them, or the different attitudes they have about the ideas of their religion or their what they meant when they said God. There were several students from Ghana, and so on. One of the significant parts about me is that 2 of the students were from Iran. The reason that I picked them is because when I was, 11, one morning I was lying in my bed at home, and I was sitting there using logic and everything, and I figured out, there's really no such thing as the Easter Bunny, and there's really no such thing as this and there's that and everything, and it went up all the way through Santa Claus, all the way to God, and I said, oh, these are just stories people make up so that they can get along with each other and so on. And that was when I started studying. That day was when I started studying God's effect on how people interacted with each other and so on. And anyway, I was all full of myself and thinking I was the smartest guy in the whole world, talking to these two Iranian students who, of course, they were Islamic, about what I had figured out about the existence of God and the difference between their God and the God that I knew about in the Methodist Church. And they suggested that I should go over to Corvallis, and because there was a meeting of people that met at the student union there who called themselves Unitarians. So I hop in my bicycle and ride over to Corvallis. You look on a map; they're only 10 miles apart. And ran over to Corvallis and went to the student union and joined the people there. Well, all the people that were going to the church at that time were graduate students and professors, and this 11-year-old kid.
Wow.
The significant thing there is that they took me in. You know, I wasn't just a little kid. I sat around in the discussions just as much as anybody else did, and I became a central thing. Anyway, I was the one in our family that sent the whole family over to the Unitarian Church. And anyway, that was, well, you know, I've been a Unitarian all the rest of my life. I'm still one. But anyway, that's how that started.
Yeah. Now, can you tell me, Peter, I mean, that's a remarkable story. So at 11 years old, you find your way through this reference from two students from Iran to a Unitarian meeting.
Mhm.
What are some of the first things that, I mean, and then you later bring other family members. What was it about Unitarianism that you found really satisfied your, or maybe not satisfied, but intrigued you enough to get you to stick with it? Because you already, it sounds like at 11 you already had this kind of question. You were already questioning. You were thinking, you know, a lot of these things that we're told are just myths, you know, and
Well, the thing that I think drew me together is it made lots of different parts of my understanding of religion come together. It fit. Uh, you know, that it was that all of these religious things were some kind of a human need that people were doing, and they were doing it in their own way, but they were doing the same thing in different words, and they were doing the same thing in with different um, um, uh, rituals and so on like this, but it amounted to the same thing. And it made for a completely different understanding of the basic religious calling that people everywhere seem to have. Um, and it's that bringing together all these people, these ideas, and how these same ideas can be practiced in different ways, but they're a similar part of our inner part, and it sort of brought all those pieces together.
wow. Well, what's interesting to me is that, I mean, this is a fascinating story. I mean, to hear you talk about, you know, this search. I mean, I'm thinking of this post World War II moment. You know, not to periodize your life, but you know, after the war, there's this kind of international crisis in
Mhm.
religion. I think in Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, comes in mind as you're talking. I'm thinking, you know, that's kind of what he was talking about. Of course, he was published by Beacon Press, which was a
Yeah,
Unitarian press, right?
yeah.
And there's a reason why Beacon published that book, because
Mhm.
it's kind of that same search that you're talking about, and in some ways also a search for a kind of a commonality of spiritual meaning, right?
Yeah. Um, for me, it's not so much finding spiritual meaning as it is the commonality between people. I'll, what I did is became an immediate atheist. And part of that story is that then as I grew up, for example, even in high school, when I went to several meetings of the Pacific Northwest District of the Unitarians, they weren't even Universalists by then, but I wasn't so much interested in the religion per se as I was the commonality of what the calling for people was, why people were doing this, and how this was important, if you will, for their civilization, for their being, developing what they are. But anyway, that's been a lifelong important thing that started when I was 11 years old,
Wow.
which was kind of fun. Another significant thing about those very early years is I was a very, very poor student, still am. I am a slow reader. The significant factor there is that when I was in the 6th grade, I failed the 6th grade. And what found out what happened like this is my mother, having seen me fail the 6th grade, got together with me and said, "What's going on?" And essentially, she started me out as part of her training to become head of special education in Eastern Oregon. She took me an hour after school every single day. This was in the 7th grade, and had me read a bunch of books like this, and I just read to her. And I started out in the 6th grade, reading on about the 3rd grade level, and I finished 3 years later in 9th grade, reading at the high school level. My mother literally saved my life. And that other angle of learning, of curiosity, if you will, like this, started little things like when I took Latin in the 8th grade, at Albany High School. I quite figured out that I was no good at remembering the vocabulary, but I was very good at remembering the caseload for all the Latin endings, the Latin prefixes and the Latin endings. And I passed Latin just by being able to translate which words were which like this, just knowing the endings and the beginnings of the words, even though I couldn't remember what the words themselves meant. But all of the testing was multiple choice stuff. Well, multiple choice gives you half of the answer right there, before you answer anything. So I passed very well there. And then in high school, my uneven learning came really through in spades. Because I passed, I was doing calculus by the time I was in the 7th grade. I had a very lucky thing in that one of my 7th grade teachers was not a very good teacher, but he liked me. He used to hold a class. This was a math teacher. He used to hold his class and say, "Do this," and then the students would be working at this, and then he and I would go in the back of the class and we would talk about mathematics. And he got me started in doing what was a differential calculus, because differential calculus is just a little extension of geometry. It's not hard. And so anyway, I didn't do much integral calculus in high school, but I knew differential calculus quite handily. But at the same time, I was just a plain dunce in English. the English language makes no sense to me at all. It still doesn't. Um, and you know but so I was like a D student in English and an A student in mathematics, and completely unbalanced that way all the way through. So then when I went off to University of Oregon, that imbalance continued. I have wandered into going to University of Oregon now, but the other significant thing that began in high school was that I met this bunch of crazies. I guess today you would call them hippies or something like this, but they had this barn, and once a week they got together and did folk dancing. I joined them in high school once a week and went down there and became quite a good dancer, to the extent that I earned part of my tuition and so on and so forth for going to the University of Oregon my first and second year by teaching dancing in a tavern in Eugene. And you know, this is a crazy life, but it was fun, and I to this day I love to dance. Okay, and the other thing is I don't dance to steps. The thing that I taught at this tavern in Eugene was, don't worry about the steps. You know, like you're supposed to do this for a foxtrot and supposed to do this for a waltz and so on and so forth. Don't worry about it. All you have to do is listen to the music and walk around to the beat of the music. That's all you got to do. And anyway, what I did at this tavern like this was the students would come in, and all the girls knew how to dance. 2/3 of the boys didn't. So I would take the boys, and with the girls right there, and so on and so forth. So I dealt with both of them like this, and we would just start walking around, and I would get used to the beat of the music. It's astonishing how many people cannot pick up with their feet what the beat of the music is that's going on. Especially freshmen in in college, males, they just don't know what the music is doing. So anyway, part of and I never took payment. All I took was tips. But it wasn't uncommon for me in 1953 to get a $20 tip. That's a major tip, in 1953. But of course, see, this was the University of Oregon, and University of Oregon, of the two schools in Oregon, the University of Oregon is the elite school. That's the business school and so on and so forth. So there were a lot of students there that had money. There were a lot of people that were driving 55 Chevrolets, brand new 55 Chevrolets to campus. Wasn't like Oregon State, which is the agriculture school and the engineering school, which, people were scraping there, but Eugene was the place to be. Let's see, silly things that I mentioned. But I think significant for me is that my abilities and what I was drawn to and so forth was very, very uneven. And as illustrating for that, my first major when I went to University of Oregon was architecture. The reason for that is I fell in love with Frank Lloyd Wright. And I had an interesting incident. Frank Lloyd Wright's main office at that time was in Spring Green, Wisconsin, which was not very far from Waukegan, Illinois, which is where my grandfather was. The summers after school, I went to work for my grandfather because my grandfather was developing several subdivisions, and I was supposed to learn how the carpentry work that people did in building their houses. Well, I didn't learn much carpentry, to tell you the truth. But one of the things I did is took the trip up to Spring Green to meet Frank Lloyd Wright. I don't know if you know anything at all about Frank Lloyd Wright. He's kind of a little guy. He really, I think he stood 5'4", 5'3", something. He wasn't a big guy at all. But anyway, I went up and introduced myself to Wright, and he was gruff. He was just he wasn't friendly at all. Anyway, I told him I was interested in architecture, and so he gave me this sheet of paper and a pencil and said, "Here, draw something," you know. And so I drew something for him like this, and he took a look at what I drew, and he says, "You're not an architect. Get out of here." That was the end of my architecture career, you know. So I didn't become an architect. And anyway, after that, my inabilities to, well, another comment about that, you know, artistically, there are the architecture people who are architects who create the designs, and there's a whole other school of people who are very good critics, and they write the books about architecture and all this kind of stuff like this, but they themselves aren't architects. They're very good critics, and very good at seeing the differences in different styles and so on, but they aren't very good at creativity. I was definitely not a creative artist. Anyway, I changed my major to physics, which suited my mathematics ability just fine. I was enjoying physics like this. But after my sophomore year, I ran out of money. And my first and only job was I found a job working for the highway department in Oregon. And needless to say, that what the highway department did was build highways. And I sort of had the bad luck and the good luck to my very first job really was to working on the highway between Brookings and Gold Beach, which is in the extreme southwest corner of Oregon, right along the coast. There was a old rattly road that went inland like this, that went between Brookings and Gold Beach, that took you about 45 minutes to take the trip. After they built the new highway, it took about 15 minutes. But anyway, for 2 years, I was the on the least skill level, bottom of the ladder worker and designing the new highway between Brookings and Gold Beach. And the significant part for me in there is that I have never in my life had every day spent in a more absolutely beautiful countryside than that countryside between Brookings and Gold Beach, right along the coast. A lot of people don't know this, but Oregon has two major mountain chains. The Cascades are north and south, a bunch of mountains that go along the coast. I mean, they go in the middle of the state, but right along the coast, there is a coast range of little fold mountains that are only about 5,000 to 7,000 feet high. But for most of that, the mountains are right up against the ocean. So the highway had to do the best it could of carving out a space right along the coast. And I have one of my dearest memories is spending a whole day working with a contractor like this at a little place between Miller Creek and Minor Creek, where these two creeks come into the ocean, falling in waterfalls coming off the mountains like this, meeting about 40 or 50 feet apart and plunging into this pool of perfectly clear green water, and then plunging from there into there. And there is no more beautiful place in the whole world than that little alcove. And I could spend several days there doing the survey work and all this kind of stuff like this. And I wasn't a typical engineer. I stopped to look and see what I was doing. And and of course, that little pool, that little thing like this was right on the center line for what we were building. We totally destroyed it without any reservation whatsoever. We dug it up and relayed it and made that highway there. It does not exist anymore. And I knew that. I knew what was going on, and I did it anyway. Anyway, little incident. Anyway, I went on from there, and the first chance, I did not like my job in Brookings. They were a harsh bunch of people. They were not friendly, especially to someone who looked at the beautiful parts that we're in like this. I took the civil service exam in Eureka, California, passed it with perfect grade. And I had a job before I even had the grade for the test. And I moved to California. And I had some good times there. The first job I had in California was that there was a section of the coast highway in California like this, going toward and across the Klamath River, not the Klamath, the Klamath River. And the highway was slipping into the ocean. There was, kept falling there. So they kept having to repair it and stuff like this. And they knew that they had to repair the whole thing, so it wouldn't be slipping in the ocean. The other thing is
was that Peter, was that 101?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And the other thing that they were doing is this was the beginning of the move toward building freeways, 4-lane highways. This was right when that first started out. So what they wanted to do, well, in the first place, the crew that I joined on that particular project was an ad hoc crew. There were 2 professional civil engineers that were co-leaders of the group. There was the party chief, and then myself was in sort of middle road, and then there were 2 people that were just rear chainmen. Okay. But all of them were, workers for the highway department, but they were doing something that they had never done before. I was the only one on that crew who had done transit, who had worked with the instrument, that you do. I don't know if you know what a transit is, but so I became the party chief. Even though I was not eligible to be the party chief, I was. And the whole attitude in that crew was, we're not doing anything special. We're just putting a temporary road in here like this for this year until they build the main road that's going to be the permanent one like this. They didn't care about the big special things that engineers do. They just wanted to build a road. I said, oh, I can do that, And so we just had a good time. I think the worst time I can remember is the fact that we had to chop down one of those gigantic redwood trees. I don't know if you've ever seen redwood trees.
Yes, my wife and I lived in Santa Cruz, California, the Central Coast.
Okay.
Yes.
We chopped down a tree that was this big, I think it took 8 people holding our hands like this to go around it, like this. Anyway, other than that, we wove around like this, so we only took down the one big tree. But that was a nifty crew because I was at sort of the bottom of the telephone of the status line, but in that crew I was one of the equals, and we just had a good time. Once they started the actual construction, I became the testing crew that tested the materials to make sure that they were conforming to what they were supposed to be doing. And then my second job was up building the Oregon Mountain Tunnel, which is a tunnel through the mountains right at the Oregon-California border, where the highway crossed there. And I helped them lay out that tunnel, and then we had to lay out the approaches on either side of that, which was a fun job. But anyway, I think that the district engineer saw something in me, and I don't know what he saw like this, but I got the good jobs. I was one of the very few people who was a worker working in the field in the wintertime and was brought on into the office in the summertime. I mean, the other way around, brought into the office in the wintertime, when they couldn't work, designing stuff. And I had a cute little incident there. And that is, at that time, I went on the crew that was designing the new highway that crossed the Klamath River. And what they were contemplating is there was a big ridge between the pathway for the Klamath River and the coast, with this mound in between like this, and they wanted to go around on the inside, on the land side, and go through the valley that the Klamath River was in. Well, that Klamath River was going down a path that on its way like this was filling in a very, very deep glacial canyon. It was essentially this canyon was full of mud, okay? But they needed to go through that canyon, and the big debate was if they built a highway in the canyon itself on the mud, they had to wait about 3-4 years for the roadbed to sink, to float in the mud like this, and before they could pave it. Either that, or they wanted to build on the side of the mountain, which the mountain was steep enough like this that they would have to cut away the mountain all the way to the top and then down the other side to make the slope for the highway. And they had to debate. One was very expensive and one took a lot of time, and they didn't know that. And so anyway, I'm the bottom guy on the totem pole in that thing like this. And I look at this problem and I says, well, when you build the bridge across the Klamath River, isn't that going to be just a 2-lane bridge? And they said, yeah, And I said, why are we building the highway as 4-lane when we can meet the bridge, just in 2-lane? So why don't we build the 2 lanes in the mountain and 2 lanes on the swamp? Let the swamp settle and build before you build the other 2 lanes. That's the way we build it. I got some extra points there.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, shortly after that, one of the contractors that we were building that was working on the highway, I don't know, he saw something like this, and he asked me to become the grade setter for his project. The grade setter is somebody who's not up on one of these gigantic machines, earth moving machines like this. I'm the guy that's down I was the guy that was down on the floor with my little one person survey crew, telling them where to work. And anyway, I got hired to be that guy by the contractor. What that meant was that I was making 3 times as much money, and I could go back to school. So that's what I did for the next 4 years, is go to school part-time and work on that, work for that contractor part-time. So I could make a whole year's worth of living, in 3 months, and then go to school. So it was good for me. Anyway, one of the fun little incidents that there is that this was during the time when Ronald Reagan was president. A lot of people don't know this, but every Thursday afternoon, Ronald Reagan would go to the conference room like this and hold open house. Anybody could go there, at the Capitol building in Sacramento, and sit in and ask him questions and stuff like this. Ronald Reagan was a very friendly.
So that's when Ronald Reagan was the governor of California.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's a very friendly guy. I mean, no brains, but very friendly guy. So I used to attend that, and I learned an awful lot about politics, just sitting in on that, and, seeing all the people that would come to him and to talk and exchange ideas and so on like this. And that was a lot of my political learning, but just getting in on that. And I couldn't have a better teacher than Ronald Reagan because he did everything wrong. I absolutely think he did. He's very well regarded. As far as I'm concerned, he was one of the worst presidents we have ever had. You know, but enough for that.
Well, no, he was, I remember in, let's see, what year was he elected? 1980. I graduated from high school in 82. I was actually in special forces in Central America
Okay.
during all of that mess. And when I got back from Central America, the Oliver North hearings, and Reagan was in the middle of all of that, and so a lot of, it's interesting because you either say it was mismanagement or foolishness or, I don't know, hubris.
Well, I really think Ronald Reagan thought he was doing a good job. He just didn't realize that people really are people. If you say you were working in Central America, a lot of those things that you probably were involved with in Central America didn't get in the papers here in America.
Right.
And a lot of activities were going on, of heads of government being knocked off and all kinds of stuff that didn't get in the papers. Well, it was known about, it just wasn't talked about. And we could go on and on about a lot of that stuff. But anyway, that was as much education there as I got, learning integral calculus at school.
Right.
But
But one more question here, just to follow up, because you said you were able to watch Reagan at an earlier stage of his career, and you were able to learn a lot about how politics work. I mean, what did you learn? What were some of the takeaways for you?
It's all about who your friends are. It really is all about who your friends are, and number one, of course, with a lot of them, especially Republicans, money talks, and of course, money is important, because you build things with money. And I'm not saying money isn't important. I'm just saying it isn't always the most vital thing, or it isn't the only thing to think about. But and most of life has its subtleties. It isn't that money is the only thing for Republicans. It's just more important for Republicans, and it isn't that status and so on isn't more important for Democrats. It's just, it isn't the only thing for Democrats. It's just more important for them. It's subtleties that make this thing, this thing work. We need them both. The fact is that things get done with money. It's just that we need to learn that it's just little pieces of paper that we're exchanging back and forth,
Exactly.
Anyway.
Peter, would you mind talking about, you shared really amazing stories about some of the different engineering projects that you worked on as a younger civil engineer, and reflections on politics, and also the beauty of kind of the Oregon California coast. What about your personal life at that time, like family? What was going on? Yeah.
The less successful part. My first wife was a little girl that my father and another engineer went through school by helping support each other during the Depression. My first wife's mother was the sister of my father's friend. Okay. my first wife's mother was crazy. She had a disaster life, and I'll have to give her that credit, which she did not survive well from. But she she apparently was used for the amusement of 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 her stepfather's friends, and we she never had any idea who her father was, because nobody had any idea who her father was. But anyway, uh, what happened is Dorothy, my first wife's mother, um, completely lost everything. She went crazy and blah 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 blah. Um, and my parents knew the situation there like this, and they offered to take her in. My daughter, my first wife, and that was when I was in the third grade, and she was in the second grade. So I knew her from grade school. She went back to live with her mother like this and grew up, so on and so forth. Had an illegitimate child like this, and then the year after my graduation from high school, and I spent in Illinois with my grandfather, I re-met her, and we hit it off very good. She was also a very good dancer. We used to do exhibitions, if you will, etc. Anyway, we got married, and I need to give her credit. She was a very, very bright woman, and she did very well. But there was a hollowness about her that I never did understand. A not altogether human being or something. But I never did understand it. Anyway, I left her just about the time she was beginning to fall apart. And what happened is she got some form, I don't know what it is, but some form of Alzheimer's or something like this. She died in dementia at about 40, maybe 38, something like that. Very, very young. She was a very pretty girl. Anyway, I ran out of patience. I couldn't deal with her. Met my second wife, dancing. Met all my wives except the last one, dancing. Um, uh, and married her. She had 4 kids already. And then one of the tragedies in my life like this, she took her own life. Well, after we'd been married for 3 years. And I lost that whole family. I don't want to talk about all that. That was a tough part of the thing like this. But my second wife was a very good artist. And anyway, I don't want, that was a hard part of life like this. Then I went through an episode that was rather strange. This is when I was living in Ashland, Oregon. You probably know a little bit. Ashland, Oregon is halfway in between Portland and San Francisco. And that's where the Oregon Shakespearean Festival is.
Yes.
After I moved to Ashland like this, I started my own business like this, which was not terribly successful. And I took the job as the plant manager at the Oregon Shakespearean Festival. That is, I was taking care of all of the buildings. There's 3 big theaters at the Oregon Shakespearean Festival, and some other ancillary buildings, et cetera. And I was taking care of all of that. I was the person that worked for the Oregon Shakespearean Festival that wasn't an artist. Anyway, I got diverted there. Anyway, after Jody died, I went through a siege that there was a group of women in Ashland that lived up the hill at a place called Dead Indian Road, that were a follower of Freud, called oh gosh, I'll think of it. I'm very good at forgetting most everything. What's his name? Anyway, it was one of the main followers of Freud.
Carl, was it Carl Jung or?
Yeah, no, not
Okay.
Carl Jung. No.
One of the kind of, they call them neo-Freudian.
Mhm.
Shoot, when I was in college, I read, who were some of those?
Gosh, he was a big name. His mind just flew out of this.
What was it?
Anyway,
Alfred Adler,
no.
Eric Erikson. So there's Adler, Jung, Eric Erikson, Karen Horney.
Give me a couple of minutes, I'll think about it. Anyway,
Okay.
what the doctrine of these group of women was that for their mental health, they needed to practice free love. Okay. There was one of them that had a very nice house with a big room in it, big as this whole apartment. There was just their dance floor. And I was a good dancer. So I became one of the few males that was associated with Reich. What was his rest of his name?
Wilhelm or Otto.
Something Reich.
Yeah, I know you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, but they would dance. They did a lot of dancing with each other and so on and so forth. But because I was a very good dancer and I'm a creative dancer, I became a central part of that. I went through a stage where I had probably 6 or 8, something like that, lovers. What can I say?
Yeah.
A lot of women wanted. Anyway, one of those women was my third wife. Okay, and she was a mistake. I won't say anything more than that. She's a nice lady, and I won't say anything bad about her like this. It was just a mistake. Stayed with her for 3 years and left her. So anyway, Maureen is my fourth wife. She's the only one that I've met not on a dance floor. And what she was is I had moved to Corvallis by that time, and I was on the board of directors at the Corvallis Church. Corvallis has a nice little Unitarian church, very nice little one. In fact, my dad and I were instrumental in designing the building that they had there. But anyway, it was a going concern, much bigger than the Salem Church. And the Salem Church has you can talk to her about what was going on in the Salem Church. Anyway, she was an interim minister at the Salem Church, and I invited her to come speak at Corvallis. And she's a shy person. I'm a shy person. It took a little while to do this, but we figured it out. And I've been married to her for 30 some years now.
Nice.
So that's that story.
That's really cool.
You can talk to her. She's the brains in the family. Actually, that's an interesting thing about me that I don't understand is all of the women in my life are smarter than I am. I can measure it. I know it. I have tested it. And they're for some reason or other, I seem to attract very capable women. And I don't know what that is. I'm ugly, and I can dance, but that didn't even work with Maureen. But it's something I don't understand, but it's there.
The mysteries of natural selection.
Yeah, I have no idea what it is, but thank God it's there.
Peter, if you don't mind me asking, so eventually you meet Maureen, and she also obviously is in the Unitarian tradition, faith tradition. And can you talk about, you talked about professional, you talked about personal, and you really begin in the Unitarian churches at the age of 11. But now you're fast forwarding through your life and you're kind of in middle adulthood. Can you talk about kind kind of your evolving beliefs? You talked a little bit about neo-Freudianism even, but what about the Unitarian component to your kind of?
Oh, about the time I was somewhere in high school, I don't know, somewhere in there, I became very certain about what I didn't believe. But I watched the real world around me like this, and I said, but Peter, you need to sit back and figure out what you do believe, who you really are, not who I am not. And really, I have been on that quest the rest of my life. What of just little incidents, little things, the life around me. I have always had known foreign students, and so I have that connection with other than our own culture, and so on. But what is it that I do believe in? And I guess I have to answer that as best I can because I don't have a good answer for it. Is that we do have a need to get beyond ourselves. Just being within ourselves isn't good enough. And I don't think the answer to that is the common, ordinary, everyday definition of what we think God is. Because to me, anyway, God is a way of putting it off to saying somebody else is taking care of this question. I don't think letting somebody else take care of that question is good enough. I think, my job is to make contact. What is it there about us that says something about our need for going beyond ourselves, going outside ourselves? And I can't answer that because I don't know the answer. I'm just saying that's the quest.
Yeah.
And that's about as good.
Yeah. But that's a really good place to begin because you're beginning with, or you're kind of beginning, moving with questions. It kind of reminds me like what Frantz Fanon said, oh, my body making me a person who asks questions all the time. And I think that, if I was, as you're telling me these pieces of your life, the atomic bomb, seeing part of that as a child, going into Unitarianism at 11, World War II, the Neo-Freudian movement, all of these people, after you're part of that movement after World War II, which I think as a historian, it's a great tragedy that we left that moment after World War II when everyone just said, "Hey, let's hit pause." Like when I read Viktor Frankl, they just Beacon republished Man's Search for Meaning recently, and I talked to I'm friends with the senior editor who was my editor. I wrote a book for Beacon, Guy Tripatniak. She's Indian, and she recently traveled to Europe to meet Viktor Frankl's descendants, grandchildren, I would suppose. And it was fascinating to hear her talk about that family. But I just think that if you look at those books that came out after World War II, like Erich Fromm, who also was considered to be kind of a neo-Freudian, the like writers like Richard Rubinstein after Auschwitz, things like that, people are saying, hey, something horrific has just happened, which demonstrates that we don't have any of the answers, and we don't even know what questions to ask, and it just seems like, and I was reading that when I was in community college, and it was the most exciting intellectual time of my life. And I just remember thinking of having regrets because I think as the society moved into like the 60s and 70s, all of a sudden people said, well, we really need to get it together. We need to have, definitive answers, but they didn't have answers. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not only what are those, but what's going on with people that you and I can have these questioning, but we can't quite reach it. We can't quite get there. And what is there about meeting very good people, decent people, that love their children, blah, 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 and so on and so forth, that don't have a clue what you and I are talking about? What's going on there? And of course, I can't answer that question. And it's you will talk to Maureen this afternoon, I think it is, like this, and she, her Unitarianism is quite different from mine, very, very compatible with mine, and I happen to think she's a genius, but I don't know. I live in a question, not in an answer.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Ronald Reagan, and I've looked at some of Reagan's papers. I've been to Stanford and the Hoover Institution, and I went with some of my graduate students, and we weren't really looking, into the politics as much as what you were talking about, like the relationships he had with people. And it just seems, we read a lot of correspondence, and it just seems that the people in correspondence with him, and this was in the mid-'70s when he was first considering making a run for the presidency. And I think he tried in 76 and lost to Ford, if memory serves. And then, 80, he got breakthrough. But the people writing him, Peter, apropos what you're talking about, were just had such a high level of certainty about the way the world worked and what Ronald Reagan was going to do to fix the world for them. And these were people from Miami, from New York, from Dallas, Seattle, all over the country. And they were not asking these questions at all. And they were just like, Ronald Reagan is going to return us to something that we feel we've lost. But what it was we lost, they never quite could get at, but they would.
That's why we don't dominate, Ronald
Right.
Reagan dominates
Yeah.
because he may not have the questions, but he sure as hell has the answers.
He did. Yeah, he had all the answers. And, you're right. Or if he didn't have them, he just subcontracted them to other people, and they kind of answer. But, well, I know I've taken up a lot of your time, but just a couple more questions, and then, we can always talk in the future. Now, Maureen told me, she sent me an email, and she said she cannot do her interview today. So I think I'll probably interview her maybe a bit later in March. But one of the other questions I had, Peter, is if you could talk about your career. Now, did you continue being a civil engineer? Is that kind of what you end your career on, or did you transition to something else? Or
no, I never finished my schooling, so I never had the certificate that said you are a qualified engineer or you are a qualified anything. I never had that. All I had was how I impressed people this way or that way, and so on. And I hit a low point where I had the end of my career at the Oregon Shakespearean Festival and hadn't found anything yet like this when I ran into Maureen. And from then on, I've been following her coattails. Essentially, I've been a very good spouse of the minister. And that's the most complimentary thing I think I could say for my career. And I think I've been a very good spouse of the minister. Because I understand something about people's needs, and what makes people tick and how they work. But in the last part of my life, I've never impressed an employer. And that's about the most complimentary thing about me that I could say.
That's actually a very good quality.
Thank you. But No, I've spent some time as a janitor and spent some time doing some other things and done a lot of free, just doing things, this and that and so on. But I haven't this 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 30 years I've been married to Maureen. Really, my real job has been spouse of the minister.
Yeah. And you have, and Shirley also asked me to ask folks about their, maybe a little bit about community life in the village, and kind of what your experience has been here, or there as you're there, and I'm not
Well,
that far away.
Yeah. Number one, I'm very pleased that we moved to the village. I am exceedingly pleased. The village, has all kinds of hokey things and good things and crazy things and so on and so forth that they do. But there's one thing that's for certain, and that is that if you're here and you take advantage of what's here, you're active. And for an old person to be active, all you have to do is look around at all these other old people that I'm surrounded with who go to dinner. That's what they do, is they go to dinner. And there's a lot of things available here. There's, I don't take advantage of dancing because Maureen is not a good dancer. And she has all kinds of qualities. I mean, she's a hell of a lot smarter than I am, but she's not a good dancer. And so that part of my life is gone, and I don't want to pick up with some other woman and show her what real dancing can be. That's not what I want to do. And so, but I mean, people talk about some politics, but she paints. We do things. I go to many different lectures, and I'm involved in some leadership things, and just activities for the sake of being activities, and I do what I always do, which is a bad habit, which is I look at people and I figure out what makes them tick, and I suppose that's a silly way to spend your time, but that's sort of what I do, but I am more than pleased that we decided to move to the village. They make available lots and lots of activities. One person can't go to the mall, and anyway, that's about as good an answer to that I can give.
Well, excellent.
Okay, I am pleased that we have come here.
Yeah, I mean, I have been to the village just a couple of times, and I've always enjoyed, and obviously I'm really happy to talk with you and Shirley is a big booster of the village, and so and I'm excited I'm actually going to be out of town next week. I'm going to the University of Pittsburgh to meet with some folks, but some of our students are going to travel over to the village to kind of do a icebreaker with some members, and hopefully get a chance to do some kind of in-person interviews a bit down the road. And we're hoping to kind of keep those going on a kind of open-ended basis as people want to be interviewed. Because I mean, just talking to you today, I mean, there's just really amazing parts of your life history that I'm just really fascinated by, and I think people are going to really benefit, by hearing from your own search, for community and for kind of commonality. And I loved how you kind of talked about, well, there's the spirituality thing, which I think is become a Western thing almost, but you're saying there's other things other than just searching for a spirituality, you know, and that's really important for people to hear today, because a lot of people, you know, like I grew up in a Christian church, or I should say a plurality of many different after being baptized Catholic, and we just stopped going because it was such a catastrophe. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was the church that I was in as a teenager was a very hardcore evangelical kind of
uh,
really frankly brainwashing outfit. And so and I think that's but then what do you do if you just leave that
and,
behind?
and you didn't find what fit for you, you know.
No,
No, I consider myself very lucky that I happened to find fits, you know, because I can very well see what you're talking about, you know. Hey, I don't fit this like this, but what I do fit isn't there. Um,
right.
and boy, I can very readily understand that, because if you don't find, if you're not exactly like me and you don't find what my analogous finding would be, you're sort of out there like a fish without the water, you know. Um,
Yeah,
but no, I really think in many ways I have had a lot of really good luck. You know, for a person of obviously limited talent, um, I've had more than my share of good luck. You know, little things like falling into the job I had at the state of California for no reason at all, in the most bureaucratic state in the union, to fall into the one little place where I didn't have to be fit into a bureaucratic hole, and I fell into it.
yeah,
You can't get luckier than that, you know.
that's really cool.
Yeah. So
Well, Peter, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit the stop button.